Welcome to online training, module 1, lesson 2. Introduction to results-based monitoring and evaluation. Lesson 2. Monitoring systems and evaluation basics for evidence-based monitoring and evaluation of development programs. The lesson outline includes expected outcomes, a brief introduction about the lesson, a highlight of development evaluation context, principles and standards of evaluation, and then issues that are driving development of evaluation. The expected outcomes from this lesson is that participants will be able to understand context of impact evaluation of development interventions. They'll also be able to understand what is driving impact evaluation requirements and determine the needs of impact evaluation stakeholders, as well as being able to define the types of impact evaluation that can be undertaken. Development evaluation context. Properly designed impact evaluations are able to answer the questions of whether programs are working or not. And as we said earlier on, this is the central element that manifests impact evaluations as being key in assisting decisions about scaling up a new phenomena or a program. This calls for caution that no generalizations should be made from a specific context. This is in the spirit that well-designed impact evaluations will be able to answer questions about the program design. Essentially, being able to identify that bit of the program that has worked, as well as those bits that have not worked. As we'll see later on, in designing the program intervention, it is able to be located in a set of assumptions. And when those assumptions are in tune during implementation, then we see a design that works. However, in the event that what was assumed has turned out to be contrary, then we see an intervention that flops. And therefore, we go back to the drawing board to relook at the design that was made. So, in this context, we see that impact evaluation provides policy-relevant information that is instrumental for the designing of existing programs in the event that it does work according to plan, or if it has perfected and it has worked, then it will inform design of future programs so that they can be more effective in serving the populations. Therefore, in impact evaluations, we want to know precisely why and how a program works. It's not enough just to know that it does work, but how does it work and why does it work? And this will be the focus of impact evaluations. So when do we do an impact evaluation? When do we undertake an impact evaluation? As already indicated, that it is not feasible to conduct impact evaluations for all interventions. Therefore, the need for impact evaluations is to build a strong evidence base for all sectors in a variety of contexts to provide guidance for policymakers. So let us look at some of the examples that would merit when an impact evaluation would be useful. Innovative schemes. We know that we are living in a dynamic world, and there might be certain elements, certain aspects that may be very innovative and would want to generate more understanding about them. When we implement such schemes, we would want to undertake an impact evaluation to generate evidence of what those innovations really bring or really entail. But also, we may be able to undertake a pilot program, which is due to be substantially scaled up. And we don't want to balloon something, expand something that we're not familiar with in terms of its understanding. And we want to generate more evidence so that when we scale up, when we roll out, we are able to have fully fledged in terms of what to expect by way of outcomes for those programs. So a pilot program will be a candidate for impact evaluation so that we generate more evidence that can inform us in terms of expanding it. It would also be useful for interventions for which there's scant solid evidence of impact in a given context. Interventions are not in a one-size-fits-all. Same intervention in a given context can perform superbly. And yet, the same intervention in a different context, it can dismally fail. So, it will be very important to undertake impact evaluations so that we are able to build a solid evidence base of impact. Impact evaluations also will be vital in selection of other interventions across portfolio on an occasional basis. Once in a while, just to build on the existing body of evidence that is there, we may wish to undertake something that is specific. It might be operational research, for example. Establishing terms of reference. We understand that during the results-based management training that we underwent, a good portion was also dedicated regarding the terms of reference. And so not so much labor there about this, but for the sake of just contextualizing the notion of terms of reference vis-a-vis impact evaluation, we would want to gloss over some aspects regarding the terms of reference. So why terms of reference? Terms of reference are key in terms of enabling that all players commit to the work at hand, but also they provide shared agreement on the work needed to be undertaken. As the name connotes, they act as an ongoing point of reference in the execution of the task. So what are the key elements that any terms of reference should have? There are quite a number of them. Just to refresh, the terms of reference are going to stipulate the design aspect of the process. They are also going to reflect the information needs. What is needed for us to come up with an assessment that is credible? It will also spell out the dissemination plan. How will the findings coming from the impact evaluation be used and reported? What is being evaluated? What is the scope of the evaluation? What are the parameters? What are the borderlines? Where does it start and where does it end? Who is commissioning? Are there particular constraints that we need to know for planning purposes and then put in place appropriate mitigation measures? And then also, it avails the resource envelope that is key to facilitate delivery of a worthwhile impact evaluation. I know that for most clients who would float an evaluation, it's common practice not to have a budget, for example. But the budget level, if embedded in the terms of reference, will give a measure to the would-be service provider, the kind of rigor and complexity that is envisaged from that exercise. The larger the budget, it means the more rigorous the exercise is envisaged and the complexities that may be there. The smaller the budget, the contrary is true. And then finally, of course, the terms of reference are going to mirror the governance arrangements. Who is in charge? Who is the service provider answerable to? Who will be involved on day-to-day running of the evaluation process? There are principles and standards that govern the evaluation processes. And let us briefly look at them. Let us start with the principles first. The evidence that is collected and used to measure, learn from, and demonstrate the impact of a program on the beneficiaries must be assessed for quality to guarantee objectivity. Like I said earlier on, impact evaluations are about singling out attribution of the effects on the beneficiaries from a certain set of intervention. Therefore, that evidence, we should be able to singularly isolate that effect, must be unquestionable. Therefore, there are principles that can be used to review and quality assure existing evidence. This evidence could be the evaluation report, a research study, or case studies. So all these pieces of evidence must be subjected to some objective set of principles. There are 5 principles against which evidence is assessed. There's voice and inclusion. There's appropriateness of the evidence, triangulation of the evidence, contribution, and transparency. Let us look at each one of them. Voice and inclusion. This implies that compelling evidence must include, at all costs, perspectives of people living in poverty, including the most marginalized. Why is that so? Because this population will remain the best judges of the change that has occurred in their lives, as well as in the wider communities. So in this case, the evidence we generate must provide a clear picture of who is affected and how are they affected. And they need to be part of the key source of understanding the contributions that the intervention is having to them as a target audience. Appropriateness of evidence. This implies that the evidence generated, it must be through justifiable methods, given the nature of purpose of the inquiry. So this must entail that evidence generation must be based on a clear understanding of what the interrogation, the investigation, the evaluation process aims to do. And this must be based on relevant and reliable data. Appropriateness also entails that the methods that are used to analyze the data that we have collected must be systematic and support the generation of convincing conclusion. The conclusions we draw from the exercise must squarely mirror the objective and systematic methods that we have in terms of analyzing the information that we have collected. Again, representativeness is very central in terms of appropriateness. The sample size from which the data has been drawn, has been generated, needs to be proportional to the conclusions that are going to be sought, as well as the level of validity that is needed. Quality of collecting that data is also very vital to render the appropriateness of the evidence that we can generate and we can render credible. This must be anchored in the team that is carrying out the assessment, which must be made up of people with required skills, competences, and characteristics that will be unquestionable. The other principle is triangulation. Triangulation implies that the evidence that has been generated must have been coming from a mix of methods, data sources, and perspectives. Why? We want to minimize the risk of possible biasness. So by broadening the methods, these data sources from where we collect this information and the perspectives, we are making that evidence not to be skewed, but one that is well balanced from the different sources as well the methods that we have used. This is mirrored in the fact that by getting different stakeholders with different perspectives, spanning beneficiaries, development partners, and the payers, we are able to validate the findings and conclusions so that we provide a vital check on the quality that has been generated. Contribution principle entails that evidence must explore how change has happened, the contribution of intervention, as well as factors outside intervention in explaining that change, which we want to locate and link it directly from the intervention to the beneficiaries. And so we see this being at the core of exploring the causal links to the intervention and the effects that beneficiaries have experienced. And the principle of contribution, therefore, examines the relative influence of other factors on the outcome or impact of the intervention on the targeted beneficiaries. And this is the central aspect of impact evaluation, as we already said. Transparency, on the other hand, discloses details of data sources and the methods that have been used, results that have been achieved, and limitations might have been encountered in data or conclusions. So it lays bare the reality that is associated with the process that we had used to generate the evidence that is before us. And so when we are laying claim to the conclusions, we are doing that in the context of all the information being available, so that ultimately this becomes unquestionable to the reader as well to the one who may even critique what we are doing, what we are presenting. What is so central in all this is that transparency and openness in the evidence that we are availing to justify the effects underpin the strengths that that evidence can command. And the transparency principle essentially assesses the logical validity even of the analysis that was used to generate the evidence. What about standards? Standards clarify what will be considered a quality and ethical evaluation. And it's common practice in some organizations that there is an agreement about using particular evaluation standards and also ethical guidelines, which will guide the evaluation and to evaluate it. A set of evaluation standards essentially answer the question that will this evaluation be effective? And therefore, these standards assess the quality of evaluation activities, the activities that are involved in undertaking the evaluation. we'll see later on the dimension of looking at how to manage impact evaluations. So these standards also determine whether a set of evaluative activities are well designed and coherently working to their potential to ensure that we have an effective impact evaluation. These standards are recommended as criteria for judging quality of program evaluation efforts in the development landscapes. And they also help in identifying how quality of an evaluation will be judged. So if we have set in motion, we have put in place these standards, and we are quite alert and conscious in including them at the design stage, we are already managing the quality aspect of the evaluation process, so that ultimately, even the evidence that is generated from this process will not be questioned. The set of evaluation standards were first developed by the American Joint Committee on Standards for Educational Evaluation, and these over time have been increasingly promoted through different professional evaluation associations globally. The African Evaluation Association, AFREA, has further adapted the original standards that were developed by the American Joint Committee on Standards of Educational Evaluation. And therefore, there are 4 evaluation standards that are commonly referred to within the evaluation realm. These are utility standard, feasibility standard, propriety standard, and accuracy standard. Let us quickly look at each one of them. Utility standard seeks to ensure that an evaluation will serve information needs of intended users. As we're talking about the terms of reference, we did define the aspect of dissemination plan. And that one includes those who will use the product of evaluation. Feasibility standard seeks to ensure that the evaluation will be realistic, will be prudent, will be diplomatic, and frugal. Propriety seeks to ensure that the evaluation will be conducted legally and ethically, but also with due regard for the welfare of those involved in evaluation, as well as those affected by its results. Accuracy underscores ensuring that evaluation will reveal and convey technically adequate information about the features that determine the worth or merit of the program being evaluated. Let us also look at what drives development evaluation. Understanding what drives in evaluation need is very crucial, in that it will help in determining who needs to be involved, when do we undertake this evaluation, the timing factors, what type of evaluation and why do we have to undertake this evaluation? This becomes very central, that for whatever impact evaluation at different scales of the intervention, it is indispensable that we need to confirm the drivers for the impact evaluation with the commissioner, the one who has commissioned the impact evaluation, so that they shed more light in terms of the motivation for the impact evaluation. It is also acknowledged that ministries, departments, as well as government agencies, we have our own continuous improvement drive for undertaking evaluations. Therefore, determining common elements that will serve the needs of both internal and external drivers is very central to assist in developing a focused and cost-effective impact evaluation process. We need, as planners, to look at different facets that are central into the evaluation process, so that we have something that is really befitting the kind of buy-in from all those involved. Besides these internal and external drivers, we also see that the evaluation process provides systematic and transparent system which can inform the internal adaptive management processes of institutions at ministerial level, departmental level, as well as at agency level. And these are very central in terms of improving the performance and resulting outcomes. Externally, there are drivers that explicitly require that as ministries, as departments, as agencies, we need to undertake evaluation. These are legislation. By law, MDs may be mandated to undertake evaluations. Recommended statewide standards and targets may make MDs amenable to have evaluations undertaken. Bilateral agreements between governments and development partners embed within them the need to evaluate policies or programs. Internal drivers offer learning through the successes and failures that are experienced in implementing programs and policies, as well as providing critical reflection on what has happened. This learning that emanates from the internal drivers for undertaking evaluation are fundamental to an effective program. And this one is at the heart of adaptive management. An institution has to adapt to the unfolding reality Adaptive management improves performance. How? By allowing appropriate program adjustments that responds to the lessons being learned during the implementation of the program. And here we see how vital a monitoring and evaluation system that avails information that is systematic, used in a feedback loop to make necessary adjustment to the program. Adaptive management assists in programs to continue to have an impact long after its completion. Because of the appropriate adjustments that are being made in the course of implementing the program, we are able to bolster, to tighten the nuts and make it more effective and worthwhile as it is rolling, so that at the end of its life, already the mechanisms have been put in place that will bolster the outcomes that are there in the course of implementation. And this is about sustainability dimension of the program. It must be noted, though, that adaptive management requires a formalized process. So it means all involved within the setup of an institution are able to be part of that process, so that it allows a response to changing knowledge and circumstances. And this is about change management within the structures and systems within an institution. And in a formalized context, the adaptive management facilitates adaptation of the program to achieve its intended outcomes. In this setup, looking at the drivers, external and internal, we see various relationships that exist between the different reporting requirements of external and internal drivers for evaluation. And therefore, a nested approach to an evaluation process will allow efficient and cost-effective use of information for reporting and decision-making on a continuous basis. The monitoring and evaluation supporting reporting requirements will need, therefore, to be planned and implemented to allow multiple reporting deadlines to be met, while at the same time ensuring that relevant information is availed, which will subsequently be used for decision-making. For example, reporting annual progress towards regional or nationwide targets is only possible if implementation activities are monitored and recorded throughout the year. If there are lapses in monitoring of implementation activities, the likelihood of also having incomplete information for the annual progress is very high. Let us look at data collection for impact evaluation. I'm aware again that Module 4 will provide quite a weighting on data collection for impact evaluation. So let us quickly look at aspects of data collection within the context of impact evaluation. Impact evaluation success depends on the following: acknowledging the importance of high quality data, determining upfront the data that is needed, identifying the data sources, designing a survey that will be used to collect the data, and fundamentally so, linking the survey design to the evaluation design. These elements will be useful in terms of building a successful result that will come from an impact evaluation. In terms of the survey, we need to use multiple instruments. When we're talking about the principles, we did underscore the fact that we need to be looking at multiple data sources. If we have multiple data sources, then there will be different instruments for each one of the sources that we have identified. So this is crucial and therefore requires that we have to do an appropriate designing of the questions that will be packaged for each instrument. And these questions need to be tested so that they are able to give us the required and needed information. We sharpen them. And then each one of them, each instrument must be supported by documentation, which is a manual that is stipulating the how part of use. And then of course, of importance is that we have to translate these instruments so that we standardize the information that is being gathered based on the common and shared understanding. This is important because if we render an instrument being translated by the interviewee in the course of the study, that one is a possible source of subjectivity of the information that can come from different interviewees. Use of multiple survey instruments will entail also electronic survey instruments, as well as platforms for computer-assisted personal interviewing. We need also to understand the role of qualitative data. I did underscore the fact that qualitative data and quantitative data are complementary to ensure that the result is effective. And an analysis plan is important. Time and cost must be looked into. Accountability to ensure that development actions lead to development outcomes is also central.